Alright, I think we might be good. Let me double check everything. Pontificator's a bit off, but I'm not too worried about that. Alright. Not exactly the music I expected to play at that given moment, but that's okay. Alright guys, game number 48's finally finished. Did we play this spoiler free? Yes, we did. We did indeed. Mall music. Alright, so music rating. A lot of the music from the first game was reused, so I want to double check what I gave the, How long ago did I play it? It wasn't too long ago, was it? I can't remember. There we go. I gave it a 7. That sounds about right. So, I really like the OST in this game. I feel like this one used the tracks a little bit better. I heard a lot more of the tracks that I really liked and stuff like that. I wasn't as big of a fan of the normal battle theme, the one that you start the game with, as I was the one that was used later, and as much as the one in the first one. But it really used a lot of the same tracks. I just think it did it better, and there was a couple other ones that were additionally a part of it as well. So it's pretty much on par with the first one. I was about at a 7.5 with the first one. I'll give this one an 8. I really do like the music in this game. I'm not exactly that big of a fan of how it's used, I guess. You hear a lot more of the town themes and stuff like that because you spend so much time in those towns. And the town themes, they're not bad, but they're all very similar. So they're not like the more interesting themes and like the more upbeat OST that you're normally used to from this creator. So, but I liked it. There was a lot of times, especially during the cutscenes and stuff like that, that I was really absorbed in things like that as well. I just feel like overall this game was executed better than what the first one was, but we'll get more into that. So I'm going to have to go exactly with what I did with the graphics for the era, because really nothing felt like it was changed at all. It was the exact same game in that regard, aesthetically, with maybe a couple different attacks and stuff like that, maybe a little bit of upgrades to their portraits and stuff like that, but for the most part it looked exactly the same. Unless I was wrong and just didn't notice stuff, it looked exactly the same to me. Like, legitimately exactly the same. Alright, so the story rating. So, this game did a much better job at executing the story, in my opinion. There is a few points in the game, Estelle's dream sequence in particular, that definitely resonated with me a lot more than anything from the first game did. The first game completely just felt like part of a game. It did not feel like a full-on experience. It barely had an ending. Everything you were fighting towards and things like that, stopping the coup and everything else, it did not feel like much of anything. It really didn't feel like I accomplished anything. It was more about the journey between the characters and things like that. This one, on the other hand, we finally had some answers for some things. The game still definitely left a lot of questions, obviously leading into the fact that there's going to be a third game. If I did not know there was going to be a third game, the way that game ended, you had to have known there was going to be a third one. And I'm still not a big fan of that, but I would say that this game was definitely executed a lot better in that regard. I still don't like the structure of the chapters. They're so up and down. Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 were pretty quick, and it was the whole go do 3 or 4 things in this general direction, then find the new area to go, and then finish a quest, and that's the chapter. That was basically the structure for the entire game. Run around all over the place until you finally get to a new area, or you finally have access to a new area and go from there. Chapter 3 was probably the worst. There's a lot of running around and stuff like that. I really like the end of the chapter, but the whole point of getting there was a problem for me. And that's my issue with this game as a whole, and just kind of quest-based systems, is I feel like the story is so built around expecting people to go and do other things. So when you have to go and do those other things when you're trying to just progress the story normally, it's unappealing to me. Especially when you have these points where you just got like really good story, or you just like did something really epic or really cool, and then the next chapter starts, and the next chapter starts with you doing something completely insignificant to the plot. And not just for, 5-10 minutes, but sometimes you're doing these things for hours before you start to actually get plot again, where nothing feels like it's going on for a significant period of time. And I guess a lot of people fill that time in with doing side quests and things like that. And if you're into that type of stuff, you kind of don't think of the little things so much anymore, of the going from one place to another and doing all these different things. But because of that, and because of that structure, it separates the story in such a way that it's hard to enjoy as much as I would otherwise. Like, I almost wish I could just go straight from one point to the other without having to do all that excess stuff that really doesn't add anything to the plot. But then you'd have a much, much shorter game and just a lot less content in general. But I wish that was an option, so you could kind of go in between whatever way you really want to do that. But the story in this one was definitely better. I still don't really like Joshua as a character. I know they're really, really, really want me to feel bad for him and things like that, and I do, obviously, but I think I've seen it way too many times now, the whole something bad happened when I was a kid and now I'm just this monster and things like that. I've seen it way too many times, and that kind of plot line's a little boring to me, and it felt a little forced. A lot of the stuff, the interactions between Joshua and Estelle felt forced. The scene on the beach, although I understand it was supposed to be really romantic and things like that, I would have much rather Estelle said one or two things and was just happy he was there, and they embraced each other and went from there. But because it's such a dialogue-heavy game, she sat there explaining everything. Things that she explained to him before. Nothing changed from the point in time in the first game to the second game. Nothing changed. She was still putting herself in danger. There was no reasoning for it other than trying to force you with text to feel a certain way. And that's really what this game does, or these games have done. It's all about the text. It's less about the visuals. It's less about showing you things. It's really about trying to almost read you into, or make you read into oblivion of understanding and feeling something. And maybe I'm just more visual in that regard, but I just feel like when you're sitting there reading constantly, sometimes it kind of ruins a moment. It didn't build it up as much for me. Like that whole, just using that as a scene in particular, because it's a pretty important scene between the two characters. It's a good expression of what the game's like to me, kind of. The dialogue sometimes just goes on a bit too long, and sometimes it just feels a little bit forced. But that being said, the story was definitely better in this one. We got an actual ending, even though it's still leading into another game. There was definitely a lot more character development this time around, and I liked some of the characters a little bit more. I still wasn't the biggest fan of some of it, but more so a fan than I was the first game. And again, overall, like I said, I just feel like this game did a much better job. Still not a fan of the structure between the chapters. Too many going uphill, downhill types of things without types of plot and things like that. But I'm going to give it a little bit more credit than I did the first one. And because of that, I also want to look at what I rated the first one again, because I think I have it in my mind here, but where are we at? Yeah. So I'm going to give it more than a 6 this time around. I'm very close to leaning towards... I was very close to leaning towards an 8 at certain moments, especially after that sequence with Estelle and stuff like that. I really like that. But I don't know. There was just too many parts where I kind of felt like it was going up and down, and I just wanted more plot and wasn't getting it. But I will give it a 7 this time around. It was significantly better than the first one. Alright, so the mechanics were pretty much the same as the first game. There was some more orbments, there was a little bit more that you could do with your crafts and things like that. There was different pieces of equipment that weren't in the first one, I think. I did not execute the system perfectly. There was times... I wasn't 100% sure about the S-brake that you could use, whether it like took your turn or not. So if your turn was down the chain somewhere and you did that, did it take your turn? I didn't use it very often, so I never really tested it. And then when I was in the heat of the moment with the battles, I was a bit too scared to rely on it. So I planned around not using it, and if I was going to really need it, I would use it. But if I would have had a slightly better understanding of it, I could have used it more. And I think it was a nice addition to the system. The grid-based system is still kind of a problem for me in this. I feel like because of how it is and you're on this grid, the game feels this need to throw a bunch of enemies at you, because your characters are pretty strong overall, especially when they're focusing on a single target, and that's by game design. But unfortunately, it makes almost every single battle the same, where you're completely overwhelmed and overrun early on in a fight, and then as soon as you start to whittle down a little bit, the fight becomes almost too easy. Sometimes the boss will have a separate phase, which will be a little bit more difficult, but for the most part, it's all about taking out the fodder that's all over the place, and once you do that, then the boss is just ridiculously easy. So most of my time that I spent failing at fights was just me changing until finally I'm like finding some way to AoE all the other side enemies down, and then go and focus on the boss and focus on healing and keeping Earth Wall up and stuff like that. So my mechanics didn't change much from one game to the other, but because of that, the battles also take really long. You have to watch every enemy die. Even if you kill 10 enemies at once, you have to watch each one of those enemies die so that it shows like the quartz or sephim or whatever it's called in the game has to pop out. I feel like maybe I understood it a little bit better this time around. I still don't understand when is a good time to unlock things for my orbment and when's a good time to focus on making new quartz and stuff like that. The game doesn't really establish anything, but when you get into the later part of the game and you're a higher level, that's when those little percentages start to really mean something on even like the baseline quartz that you can equip. So the game changes so dynamically by the end. Your damage of, 50, 70, a couple hundred and stuff like that becomes almost 1,000 or more with every single attack, and that's equipping some of the same stuff because the percentages are so significant. But that's a problem with using percentage-based stuff, is earlier parts of the game when your stats are really low and stuff like that, you never really get to experience how much does 1% really do for you. There's no real way to see it. So I'm gonna go slightly above what I did for the last one as well, but I do, like I said, I'm still not that big of a fan of the actual battle system. I love the dragon fight. The dragon fight was fantastic. It was the first time where they really used all the elements of that grid-based system. Your characters could be anywhere on the map, but the dragon would go up and come back down and land on top of you. It would deal damage, it would push you away, had abilities to push your character from one side of the map to the other. You had to get close and hit its feet, which put you in position to get stomped on or to get bit by it, and then it also had a flame attack that would go in like an arc and hit people from like the back. It was so well designed around the battle system. And even though the fight itself was actually pretty easy, because you were only fighting one enemy and the game's built around you fighting multiple enemies, it was my favorite fight between both games, and the first time that I really enjoyed the battle system. And then the rest of the mechanics are just that, the quest-based system, which, again, you guys know I'm not too into. I tried this time around not to do quests necessarily, but I tried to exterminate more of the monsters, and if I kind of was in an area and could get items that weren't too far on my way, I did those as well. But I still feel like I might have enjoyed this game better if there just wasn't so much relying on doing quests as a bracer to progress. If it just focused on the story and all that type of stuff became secondary. But it was nice to get additional money and stuff like that for killing an occasional enemy or just going through the plot and getting some money there, since you don't really get money from killing enemies and stuff like that. But I'm going to say that it's about the same for me from the first one to the second, but that dragon fight, if there's more of that type of stuff in some of the future games, I would really enjoy it. So I'm going to go ahead and give this a 7, and the only reason I'm giving it more points than the last one is, for one, the dragon fight and the additions that they did make to it. did make the battle system slightly more fluid, even if I did not execute it properly. And I think orb mints were a little bit easier to access this time, even though I probably spent money stupidly and made stupid quartz and things like that. It was a little bit easier, a little bit more intuitive, and I found a lot more quartz this time going through the game as well. I didn't grind at all throughout the game, but I could see people grinding for some of the fights to make them easier and stuff like that. And if you were to do all the quests, or want to do all the quests, that would definitely be a significant grind of running back and forth. I'm almost done, man. But that being said, if yeah, I remember why I gave it a 5. But that being said, with the running back and forth between areas and stuff like that, and the quests themselves, and the structure of having to do those 4 or 5 things, and then finally being able to progress, and then going to do a dungeon and things like that, Yes, there was a lot of Sepith and chests, so I got to actually, you know, test some stuff and things like that this time around, which I liked. I didn't get to really do that too much in the first one without grinding. I still feel like the structure of the game as a whole with the story was just kind of grindy. So much of the stuff doesn't feel like part of the story to me, and I understand that it's about being a bracer and kind of like feeling what that's like. But I guess that part just, I'm not so absorbed in that. The being a part of the Bracer Guild feels so secondary to me when it comes to the actual plot in this game. And maybe that's just me and not everyone else, but... So I'm going to go ahead and give that a 6. And overall, I'm going to go ahead and give the game a 7, I think. I'm at about a 7.5. I'm really close. I'm also interested, I can't remember what I rated the first one altogether. I'm very curious myself to see, because, yeah, I gave it a 7. The game definitely has some improvements. I'm very curious to see what the third one looks like. I'm on the fence as to whether I want to give it an 8 or not, because it's definitely better than the first one. And it's about a 7.5 in my mind. Yeah, I'm going to give it a 7. There was definitely stuff that was improved in this one. It's very close to, a lot closer to a 7.5 this time around, but definitely better than the first game. Alright, let me see what you guys rated here. Just let me do some math, and then we can go on to the raffle, which is what most of you are waiting for, I'm sure. Alright, you got 30 there. 27 there. 32. It seems like we all rated it pretty much the same when it comes down to it. You guys are definitely higher this time around than the last one. And you guys gave it an 8.4, so we'll round that up to an 8.5. It's basically an 8.46, so... will I replay this one? Not likely, but I am curious of the different dialogue choices and stuff like that. This one was more fun to play than the first one, for sure. But it wasn't significantly different either. Like I said, I still wish they changed the quest structure a little bit more, and I probably would have enjoyed it more. And the approach of the writing and things like that sometimes with how they tried to... I felt forced to the game was trying to force me to feel some ways, but either way. No, I'm not likely to play this one again. But I am curious as to the difference in dialogue for picking different characters at different points. I'm specifically interested in having Zin in the one fight in the tower there at the end. What would have happened, how that would have been different if I would have gotten more backstory and stuff like that there. So I'll probably look that type of stuff up. Probably look at some videos. Alright, we beat it on 15th of April 2018. It took us 45 hours, 20 minutes, and 57 seconds. I did not bring Zin for that particular fight, no. On the tower at the end. I just kept the same party the whole time. Yeah, like I said, I'm genuinely curious. I'm surprised the game didn't force me to have him there, but it didn't, and I missed out of it. But I can always look that up, I suppose. I could have made a save there and went back to it, although I would not have wanted to have to refight the boss just to get it if you don't get a cutscene without beating the boss. Alright guys, again, for those of you that are new here, it is Raffle time. This is the way we pick the games. All you have to do is type the word Raffle in. If you type the word Raffle, you're entered in a chance to win, and if you win, you get to pick the next game that I play. All you have to do is type the word Raffle. And while you guys are doing that, I'll talk about this game a little bit more. Like I said, that dream sequence, I feel like that's something the first game was heavily missing. Not just that sequence as a whole, but just the writing and stuff like that that was missing. I actually got some character backstory for once, other than the little tidbits of information that I got of people talking about their past and stuff like that. I finally got some type of backstory for the characters, and it's a lot easier to get attached to the characters when it's in a sequence like that that's less dialogue driven and more just the experience as a whole, like watching them fish together and like just going through some of those scenes of just experiences that they had and things like that. I prefer that type of storyline, and although there was dialogue there, it was really well written, but it was really well written to focus on the actual scenes that were going on. It wasn't just about trying to explain everything away, explaining how I should feel at this moment or anything like that. The game didn't try to push me in any direction with that dialogue, with like, they try to use Estelle a lot in this game to kind of express how the player should feel, in my opinion. It's not just Estelle and how she feels as a character, which she's definitely built that way, but talking about, well, that's sad, or you know, like, that makes me smile, or something like that, or her talking about her heart beating faster and things like that, when she turns around when Joshua would say things. It's all about really trying to express to the player how they're supposed to feel in the dialogue, and I just prefer feeling. If something happens, I'm gonna feel how I feel, and that's about it. But I talked to Nakurdi about it a little bit earlier. We used Final Fantasy VI as an example because the characters and the way the characters are developed in that game aren't exactly the best either. But Celeste and Locke and their relationship as a whole is portrayed a lot less through dialogue and a lot more through their actual interactions and things like that. And I felt like that's what the dream sequence was actually like. But either way, you guys have been waiting long enough, I think. Let's see how many people we got in here. Looks like we got 20 people. I think everyone that said it, everyone that said Raffle's in here, I think. Let me double check. Yep, it looks like everyone's in here. Alright, guys. Good luck, everyone. 3, 2, 1. Rigged! Why can't I insert a row here? Oh, there we go. Congratulations! I don't think you've won before, but let me double check. Congratulations, man. You are picking game 50. Keep in mind we have a 15-minute time limit to pick the game. But that's plenty of time, so go ahead and take your time. You finally got it. Game number 50, man. That is a highlight point for the tour. Adelier, Iris, Eternal Mana. Alright. I have never played it, so I do not know anything about it. I'm guessing it's PS2. I guess, yeah, if it's Mana Chimia, that's like from the same vein of games, I think, right? So technically I've played one of them, I guess. But I've never played any of the Adelier Iris games. I do have them, though. I have all 3 of the PS2 games. I've just never played them. In fact, they're still in the plastic wrap. I got a bundle of all of them at some point. But yeah, there we go. We got game 50 picked. I just got to make sure that we don't have any issues with it on the my PS3, I guess. I'll do some research and things like that to make sure that we don't have as much trouble as we did with a lot of the other PS2 games that we've played. I just need to look at getting a PS2 to stream from. Either way, guys, thanks for sticking around. We're going to do what we always do at the end of a game. Since we beat a game, we are going to try to raid somebody, since this tends to be the time we have the most people here. So let me see who's streaming, who we could maybe send some love. But in the meantime, while I'm looking for somebody, you guys can decide what we're going to say. See you later, Jago. No problem. Yeah, we can just... Let's do that. Let's go with Blorf. Alright. Let's see who we're gonna raid first of all. There's not too many people streaming. I think I'm gonna host... What is this? Spy Party? I don't even know what this is. I'm going to host Gintatsu here. He's doing some Breath of Fire practice for RPG Limit Break. Blorf is from this game, from Trails, if you guys aren't sure. One of the characters said it multiple times. But anyway, we're gonna go ahead and raid Gintatsu here. Go ahead and type your best Blorfs. Go ahead and put some emotes in it, if you like. Just have some fun. Say hi. Let's show him some love. Thanks again for sticking around, everybody. If I don't see you tomorrow, have a great rest of your weekend. We'll start some Legend of Legaia soon. Have a good night.